and I won't be so ambitious or worried about my career or where am I going and what's going to happen to me, but just that I could live my life and just accept the terms and be grateful.
At 79, Hollywood icon Diane Keaton, known for her charm, wit, and timeless performances, now faces a deeply heartbreaking reality. Behind her radiant smile and legendary career lies a story filled with loneliness, loss, and emotional pain that few ever imagined. Once the darling of the silver screen, Keaton's journey has taken a turn that's left fans truly heartbroken. So, what really happened to the woman who once had it all? Today, we uncover the emotional truth behind Diane Keaton's devastating and deeply personal tragedy. The quiet twilight of Diane Keaton. In her final months, the woman who had once lit up Hollywood screens with her charm and eccentricity began to disappear into the shadows of her own life. Diane Keaton, the actress whose laughter could brighten even the darkest scene, had always embraced aging with grace and humor. Yet behind her trademark hats and radiant smile, time was quietly rewriting her story. On October 11, 2025, the world was struck by heartbreaking news of Diane Keaton, who died at the age of 79. Her family confirmed it to People magazine, ending weeks of private speculation and silent concern. For many, the shock was overwhelming. She declined very suddenly, which was heartbreaking for everyone who loved her, one close friend revealed. It was so unexpected, especially for someone with such strength and spirit. Friends had noticed subtle changes, but few realized how serious things had become. In her last months, Diane withdrew completely from public life, surrounded only by her closest family. Even longtime companions, those who had shared decades of memories and laughter, were kept in the dark. "She was very private," another friend said softly. "Even those of us who had known her forever didn't fully understand what was happening." Carol Bayer Sager, the Grammy and Oscar-winning songwriter who had once collaborated with Keaton on her holiday single First Christmas, shared a heartbreaking memory. "I saw her 2 or 3 weeks ago and she was very thin," she told People. "She had lost so much weight." It was a visit filled with warmth and nostalgia, but beneath their shared laughter was a quiet awareness that something irreversible had begun. The decline seemed to come suddenly, but those who knew Keaton best understood that her health had long been a delicate subject. She had faced basal cell carcinoma at just 21 and later endured surgery for squamous cell carcinoma, 2 forms of skin cancer that left her both physically and emotionally scarred. Though she survived, she often spoke of those experiences as warnings. "They were reminders," she said, "that life is fragile, and sunlight, however beautiful, can burn." Still, Keaton never allowed illness to define her. For decades, she stood as the symbol of independence, eccentric beauty, and quiet rebellion. Her characters, from Annie Hall to Something's Gotta Give, mirrored her real-life courage. A woman who refused to conform, who wore what she wanted, loved without apology, and aged without pretending. But behind the confident exterior, there was a loneliness few ever saw. Those close to her described a gentle melancholy that deepened over time. A mix of reflection, nostalgia, and acceptance that often settles in when the applause fades and the lights grow dim. Her death, cloaked in mystery, stirred both grief and speculation. No official cause was released, leaving fans to wrestle with questions she never answered in life. Perhaps that was how Diane wanted it, to leave the stage quietly, her story unfinished, her truth left between family walls. And so, as tributes poured in from around the world, it became clear that Diane Keaton's final act was one of silence, a powerful reminder that even the brightest souls can fade without warning. Behind her laughter lay an ache the world never fully saw, a whisper of mortality wrapped in elegance and grace. And as the curtain finally fell, Hollywood didn't just lose an actress. It lost a heartbeat that once made its golden age feel alive. Her legacy, though, remains untouched. a testament to resilience, honesty, and the complicated beauty of being human. Yet beneath every tribute, every clip replayed in her honor, lingers one haunting thought. What unspoken sorrow lived behind that unforgettable smile? But what if Diane Keaton's radiant smile hid a lifetime of untold pain, lost love, and secrets no one could unravel? Stay with us. The truth is just about to unfold. The loneliness behind the laughter. In a city built on illusion, where every smile hides a secret, Diane Keaton's charm glowed like something eternal. She was the woman who made awkwardness feel elegant, the soft voice, the playful wit, the layered clothes that became her armor and her signature. But behind that luminous image lived a story not written in glamour or applause, one of longing, solitude, and the quiet ache of a woman who gave the world everything, yet often felt unseen by it. Throughout her 79 years, Keaton's life remained curiously untouched by the permanence she portrayed on screen. She never married, not once, an absence she addressed with disarming honesty and humor. "I never found a home in the arms of a man," she once said, half laughing, half confessing. It was the kind of line that audiences admired for its wit, but friends understood as a shield. For all the strength and independence she exuded, there was a tenderness beneath it, a yearning for connection that the world's spotlight could never satisfy. Her most famous romance was with Al Pacino, the fiery co-star whose brilliance matched her own. Together, they had the kind of chemistry that felt fated, both on and off screen. For a time, their relationship seemed to carry the promise of something lasting. Yet, like so many Hollywood dreams, it unraveled quietly. Pacino's restless ambition collided with Keaton's desire for stability, and when their love ended, she was left hollow. Not bitter, but broken in a way that never fully mended. Later, she would admit that she had loved him deeply, and that the loss had carved a space inside her she never managed to fill again. There were others, fleeting connections, kind faces, moments that almost became something more. But none lasted. "Too complicated to keep," she would say of herself, with the same self-deprecating humor that made her so adored. Beneath the laughter, though, there was truth. Keaton's independence, the very quality that inspired millions of women, sometimes stood as a wall between her and the intimacy she quietly longed for. Friends described her as a presence that could light up a room, yet when the noise faded, her silence was heavy. There was a sadness in her eyes, noticeable only when she thought no one was looking. Fame had given her a life of admiration, but not companionship. As the years passed, that solitude deepened, not into despair, but into a kind of quiet acceptance. She spoke often of watching others grow old beside someone who knew their soul. "I didn't have that," she once said softly. "There's no one to share the remembering with." Yet Keaton never allowed loneliness to defeat her. Even in the emptiness, she found ways to create meaning, through her work, through art, and later, through motherhood, which would become her greatest joy. But before that rebirth, there were years when her Los Angeles home echoed with the laughter of ghosts, fragments of old film sets, of friends long gone, of love stories that ended before they began. Her love life was not defined by failure, but by a haunting awareness of what she had missed. Every red carpet smile, every award speech, every scene she played carried an invisible thread of longing. Diane Keaton's brilliance was undeniable, yet behind the laughter that lit up the world, there always lingered the quiet, unspoken truth of a woman who had learned to live beautifully with the weight of being alone. And how did Diane Keaton's dazzling life mask the deepest loneliness within? Could fame truly fill the void she carried? Stay glued to uncover the untold truth. A life torn between triumph and turmoil. For half a century, Diane Keaton stood at the heart of Hollywood's golden circle, radiant, witty, and utterly unforgettable. She became an icon of individuality, her quirky fashion and sharp humor transforming her into a symbol of effortless grace. But behind the applause and the flashing cameras, there existed a quieter, lonelier version of Diane, a woman who smiled for the world while privately wrestling with wounds that success could never soothe. Her charm, her laughter, her eccentric style, they weren't just parts of her persona. They were her armor, protecting the fragile, questioning soul within. To audiences, she was Annie Hall, free-spirited, magnetic, endlessly alive. Yet in her most private thoughts, she was a woman haunted by self-doubt, forever battling the whisper that she wasn't enough. In her memoir, Then Again, 2011, Keaton revealed that her hunger for perfection had less to do with ambition and more to do with fear of fading, fear of being unseen once the lights went out. She confessed that every award, every standing ovation, felt fleeting. "The applause fades," she once said, "and what's left is you, staring at yourself, trying to believe the world wasn't wrong about you." Her life, though dazzling, was built on contrasts: fame and fragility, success and self-scrutiny. Beneath the laughter, she carried memories of long, painful nights, shaped by the shadows of an eating disorder that had followed her from her early 20s. Long before her Oscar win for Annie Hall in 1978, Diane was already engaged in a private war with bulimia. She spoke candidly about eating enormous quantities of food, then purging in secret, caught in a vicious cycle that she described as the lowest point of her life. It was a battle she fought in silence, while the world saw only brilliance, a cruel irony that would define much of her existence. The physical toll didn't end there. At just 21, she was diagnosed with basal cell carcinoma, a form of skin cancer that would later return as squamous cell carcinoma. The repeated surgeries, the quiet dread, and the awareness of her own vulnerability became part of her daily reality. Even as she aged with grace and poise, there was always that faint shadow, a reminder of how fragile even the strongest spirits can be. But the deepest ache was not of the body, it was of the heart. Though she shared meaningful relationships with men like Al Pacino and Warren Beatty, love always slipped through her fingers before it could take root. She once admitted, without bitterness but with weary honesty, that she never found a home in the arms of a man. To the world, she seemed fiercely independent. In truth, that independence was both her triumph and her tragedy. As the years passed, her solitude became quieter, her circle smaller. When her health began to falter in 2025, those closest to her said it happened so suddenly, so heartbreakingly fast. Yet to anyone who truly knew her story, it felt less like an abrupt ending and more like the final curtain on a lifelong performance. One where she had mastered the art of smiling through pain. Her death at 79 left the world grieving not just an actress, but a mystery. A woman who had given her soul to the screen, yet always seemed to hold something back for herself. In the silence that followed her passing, one truth became painfully clear. Behind every dazzling scene, every radiant smile, Diane Keaton had been quietly carrying the weight of her own beautiful, unspoken sorrow. So, what did she truly hide behind her laughter and fame? And could the world ever unravel the sorrow she carried alone? Keep watching. The Silent Salvation. She found too late. For most of her life, Diane Keaton lived with an emptiness that no standing ovation could quiet. The applause faded, the spotlight dimmed, and what lingered was a hollow ache that success could never soothe. She had given her heart to her craft, poured it into roles that shaped modern cinema. Yet in the stillness after the cameras stopped rolling, she often found herself alone. Love had brushed against her life many times, but never stayed long enough to build the permanence she quietly longed for. Marriage, an idea she both resisted and yearned for, always felt like a door she could see but never open. Everything changed when she stepped into her 50s. In 1996, at a stage when most women in Hollywood were being quietly sidelined, Diane made a decision that redefined her story. She adopted a baby girl named Dexter. 5 years later, in 2001, she welcomed her son, Duke. There were no vows exchanged, no partner waiting at home, no picture-perfect family built for cameras. It was simply Diane, a single woman standing on the edge of middle age, holding two small children who would finally give her a sense of belonging she had searched for all her life. She called motherhood the most humbling experience she had ever known. It stripped away the perfectionism that had haunted her career and left only the raw, unfiltered reality of love. Gone were the carefully constructed performances and controlled emotions. In their place came sleepless nights, silent worries, and moments of self-doubt that even an Oscar winner couldn't script her way through. For the first time, she wasn't performing. She was living, learning to give love without expecting anything in return. Her late embrace of motherhood was both a triumph and a quiet reckoning. In an industry obsessed with youth and image, Diane had chosen a path entirely her own, defying every unspoken rule about what a woman could or should be after 50. But even in her newfound joy, there was a tender sorrow, a recognition that this love, pure and transformative as it was, had arrived after so much loss. She had spent years building emotional walls, choosing independence over intimacy. And when she was finally ready to open her heart, time had already taken its share. Friends said her children changed her in ways no role ever could. They softened her edges, grounded her in the simplicity of everyday life. For the first time, she began to speak openly about her regrets. The years lost to ambition, the quiet loneliness hidden behind laughter, and the truth that fame, for all its shine, could never replace the intimacy she'd missed. Motherhood didn't erase her pain, but it redefined it. It gave her purpose in the quiet spaces where applause once echoed. She learned that love doesn't always arrive in the form we expect, nor at the time we want it most. For Diane Keaton, it came later, fragile, unexpected, yet powerful enough to remind her that even after decades of solitude, life still had one more beautiful act to give. And what truly broke Diane Keaton? Was it the weight of family, the emptiness behind friends, or the relentless demands of her career? Stay tuned. The shadow. She couldn't outrun. Even at the height of her fame, when the cameras flashed and her name glimmered in headlines, Diane Keaton carried a private sorrow that no award could erase. Behind the laughter and charm that defined her public image lay a story she rarely allowed the world to see. The story of her younger brother, Randy Hall. While Diane's world was built on light, Randy's slowly sank into shadow. Randy had once been full of promise, a quiet, imaginative soul who turned his inner world into art. He painted, wrote haunting lines of poetry, and built intricate collages that mirrored the strange beauty of his mind. But what made him brilliant also made him fragile. As years passed, his creativity blurred into confusion. Doctors would describe his condition as a tangled mix of bipolar disorder, schizoid tendencies, and later, Parkinson's disease layered with dementia. To Diane, though, he was never a diagnosis. He was simply her brother, the boy who once laughed beside her in their childhood home, now trapped inside a mind she could no longer reach. As Diane's career soared through the 1970s and beyond, Randy's life grew smaller. Hollywood consumed her time, and every new film pulled her further from the world they once shared. She admitted that as her own life expanded with fame, his seemed to collapse into silence. He lived mostly in isolation, surrounded by his art, but distanced from people. Calls became infrequent, visits too short, and a deep, unspoken guilt settled inside her. Fame had given her everything the world could offer, yet stripped away the time to hold on to someone who mattered most. Their parents, Jack and Dorothy, had once anchored the family. Dorothy, a meticulous chronicler of memories, filled journals with photographs and handwritten notes, a record of love and loss that Diane would one day turn to in search of understanding. When both parents were gone, Diane became Randy's guardian, though by then he was a man slipping further into the fog of illness. She visited him in care homes, pushing his wheelchair down quiet hallways, whispering familiar stories, hoping to stir something in his fading memory. Some days, his eyes met hers with recognition. Other days, there was only a distant stare. Still, she stayed, speaking to the brother who had already drifted far beyond words. In her memoir, Brother and Sister, Diane revisited their intertwined lives through her mother's notes and Randy's fragmented writings. It wasn't just a reflection, it was a confession, an attempt to piece together a love story broken by time, distance, and pain. She wrote not from guilt alone, but from longing, a need to understand how two children raised under the same roof could end up living in such different worlds. In interviews, she revealed the ache that never left her. When I look back on Randy, I just think, I wish I could have been a better sister. Randy's decline was cruel and gradual. Alcohol dulled his pain, but it also deepened his distance from reality. By the end, dementia and Parkinson's reduced his world to a hospital room where hours melted into confusion. Diane visited often, her hand clasping his, even when he no longer knew who she was. For the woman the world saw as fearless, those moments were her most fragile. And there, far from the applause and lights, Diane Keaton learned that some losses do not end. They echo. For all her triumphs, all the roles and red carpets, the story she could never rewrite was the one that mattered most. The quiet, unspoken tragedy of the brother she could not save, whose fading presence became the haunting echo that followed her long after the applause had faded. So, what do you think really haunted Diane Keaton behind the spotlight? Was it fame, lost love, or the brother she couldn't save? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.